Hello, everyone. I hope you enjoyed the webinar today. I noticed there were some questions in the Q&A box, so I'm going to deal with those in a moment. I hope you enjoyed it today anyway, and we're gonna get to those questions in a while. But I thought what I'd do is I thought I would start with the reflective questions. So does anybody feel that they want to kind of volunteer to give us their thoughts on perhaps the elicitation techniques that they currently use in the classroom?
Rachel, what was the first reflective question? Because I can't even remember. Sorry.
Yeah, so the first one was, what elicitation techniques do you currently use when you teach? So yeah, if guys could share their ideas and let us know what they currently use, that'd be great. Erin.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yep. Hello. Hi. Nice to see you all. Thank you very much. That was really, really interesting. I'm a fan of so many of those techniques and use a lot of them. Like you said, I agree that it's not something that just happens in the presentation time at the beginning or even in a warmer. It goes on all the way through the lesson. Anytime something comes up, you start eliciting it even further. And I think that's a great way of dealing with students' extra questions. I think that, yeah, one thing that I also do is I like to use photos like yourself, and I also like to use videos, or like maybe the beginning of a video that I'm then going to go on to use, kind of like you did with Pedro when you were eliciting the grammar lesson. I might do that with video as well. Do you ever use video in class?
Yes, I do sometimes. I might use short clips actually, to elicit what's going to happen next, for example, those kind of things. So yeah, I think video definitely has its place in the classroom for sure.
I think it's you're right, it's different. I think pictures are often better because you can control it more and you can keep on eliciting at the board like you were saying. So I agree, they have a place, but I think pictures are always the best.
Yeah, and also other elicitation techniques like miming. Sometimes it's easier just to mime something, for simple action verbs, as demonstrated in the video. But pictures, I love pictures. I mean, of course, you can't always use a simple picture for some items. So, for example, if you've got something like the word doubt, of course, sometimes you might just have to give the oral definition, because there isn't really a simple picture or a simple mime that could convey the meaning. So
I agree with that.
Yeah.
I was just going to say, I think what you mentioned about synonyms and antonyms is very useful as well, because when you have something like doubt, that might be super tricky, but you can always look at the opposite and it could come up. But like you said, it's often easier to use pictures or mime. I think as well with miming, I like to get, you were talking about games with students, I like to get students miming as well. And I like to do that with grammar. So if we're practicing, I don't know, for example, the present continuous, I might give them pieces of paper that have an action on it, like taking a shower or reading a book. And the students have to guess what the student is doing, but by using the whole sentence, like you are reading a book. And I think that goes down very well as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's brilliant. You could even do get students to mime their entire morning routine to each other. So it is it's a nice activity.
Definitely.
Thank you very much, Erin. Would anyone else like to answer perhaps the next reflective question, which was, which approach do you think is more effective when teaching vocabulary? Providing lengthy explanations or eliciting, and why? So I know we kind of covered that a little bit with Erin. We spoke about that a little bit, but does anyone else have anything that they want to add? I mean, personally, I would only use oral definitions if there was no other way that I could convey meaning. As Erin and I discussed, with some more complex items like doubt, even if you try to provide a picture or an image for that, it can be very ambiguous, and if you try to offer an antonym, that also can be very ambiguous. So sometimes you might just have to say, doubt is when you're not sure, when you're not certain about something, because sometimes that's the quickest way of getting that message across to your students. Does anyone else have anything they want to add to that? Okay, we can move on. That's absolutely fine. We can move on to the next reflective question then. So I'm sure that some of you guys are thinking, well, eliciting, you can't do it all the time, can you? So, when is it too much? So, what could be the downside to eliciting too much in the classroom, and why? So, do we have any takers for that question?
Oh, Rose. Okay, she beat me to this. Okay, let Rose speak. I have a question though, Rachel, okay? Later, so don't forget about me.
I'll never forget about you, Gabby.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Hi, Rachel. Thank you. First of all, thank you for all the information. I thought that was great. Obviously, eliciting is a great technique. I think the only downside, to answer the question, would be that sometimes it's a little time consuming. Especially if you have a shorter class, depends how long the class is. Maybe some of the students, maybe you have a very mixed ability in the classroom. I think that could be a possible downside. Obviously, I think in the long run, it helps them stay more engaged and really grasp the material that you're teaching. But sometimes it's just very time consuming. I think that would be the only downside for me that I can think of. I don't know what you think about that.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's a useful technique to use, but you've got to be careful. I think the best thing to do would be to plan in your lesson plan when what you're going to try to elicit, because I think sometimes you don't really want to turn your lesson into a guessing game. You know what I mean? It can be very frustrating for students. They can get very frustrated, especially if you're you're like trying to elicit something and your students are just looking at you blankly, or they're kind of saying everything other than what you want them to say. That can be really, really frustrating. So I think if you get to that point in a lesson, I think the best thing is just to tell them the answer and move on.
Okay.
So I think if your students are struggling, then really just move on. But I think in terms of what you elicit, it's something that you should plan ahead for sure. In fact, someone asked that question in the Q&A box, so I can deal with that now.
Even writing down the questions that you're going to ask would be
absolutely
good, right? Yeah.
Absolutely. So make it part of your plan. So for example, if you're doing a reading lesson and you have a reading text, and of course the reading text you give your students will be level appropriate, otherwise you wouldn't give them that particular text. But even still, you want to go through that text and maybe pick out 4 or 5 words that you think they may struggle with. And when I mean struggle with, what I mean is, will those words stop my students from being able to do the tasks accompanying that reading text? Will the students not be able to understand the overall meaning of that text because of these language items? So I would pick out a few. You could do the same for listening as well. Go through the tape script, pick out a few items, and just check those with your students. I would say that's probably the best way. I would say over eliciting. If you're not comfortable, a lot of teachers, it takes some time to feel comfortable eliciting. So I would say initially, just pick out maybe 4 or 5 items before reading or listening and see how you go with that. But of course, that's not to say that other things will not come up in your lesson that you haven't planned. Of course they will. Sometimes a student's going to say to you, oh, teacher, I don't understand what is this, and you can then try to elicit from them, well, what are we looking at here, by using a picture or mime or whatever. So I think that comes with time, though, with teachers that are new to the TEFL classroom. Initially they're probably going to think, oh my god, I can't do this is not what I'm used to. But the more you plan it and the more you put that into practice in your lessons, I think the more confident you will become with those techniques.
Thank you.
Thanks very much for your question. Okay, we're gonna deal with the question answers in a moment, so the questions in the Q&A box in a moment, but I think we've just got a couple more of those reflective questions, one more actually, and I know we covered this slightly in the video just now, but the last reflective question was, do you think elicitation techniques can be used to teach grammar, and why? So I guess, well, first of all, does anyone want to have anything to say about that before I give my answer? So how can we use eliciting when we are teaching new grammar items? Any suggestions or any ideas? Or anything that you saw in the video that you might want to talk about?
Well,
Okay.
I have a question, Rachel.
That's okay.
This is not, it's actually something that came to my mind a little bit earlier when you were talking to Ross. In terms of, I mean, of course, we all know that elicitation is a time-consuming process, right? But do you think that it may also be the case of kind of some students being less responsive to elicitation and some students more responsive? So my question is, how important is it to actually train your students to respond to your elicitation techniques? So it's not all about you as someone the teacher who's eliciting, but it's also about the state of mind, in your student's state of mind. I mean, if they don't believe that elicitation is actually effective, if they see it as a waste of time, then obviously your elicitation will take longer than it would if your students were more responsive. I mean, I just wonder how you feel about it.
Yeah, I would encourage, right from your first lesson with your students to explain to them, this is what I expect from you. Especially with every new class I have, I always go through this. Okay, what do you expect from me, and what do I expect from you in the first lesson? So I would create rules for the classroom. So what I expect from my students, and then I would get them to say what they expect from me. Well, miss, you're going to turn up on time every day. Yes, I am. Well, miss, you're going to, I don't know, praise us, make us feel good when we get something right. Yes, exactly. Then I would do the same. I would say, well, within my class, I use lots of questions just to check you're with me, and that that you're comprehending everything, you're understanding everything. And some of you might not feel comfortable. It's not what you're used to, but we're going to get you used to this. I think it's really important right from the beginning to make it clear that that's what they should expect from you. And I know exactly what you're saying, Gabby. Some with some cultures, for example, they're just they're more used to that passive way of learning.
Sometimes it's impossible, like virtually impossible, to draw this information out of students. So
yeah, and also another idea that I have was, maybe if you feel that you've got some students that are more confident than others, it might not even be a cultural thing. It might just be some students are more confident with, putting the hand up and answering. You could get, cooperative learning going on. So you could get, say, okay, students, you're going to get a color, and the person has the same color as you. When I start doing my eliciting, I want you to sit with your partner of the same color, and in my head I know that one of those is slightly more confident than the other, and then I would get them to discuss what they think it is together, before actually asking them, right, because always you're going to get the same as one of the questions said.
Yeah, I think it was Erin. It's a beautiful question, right? Yeah,
it's a great question.
Do you nominate, or do you just throw a question at a class? What do you do?
Yeah, well, a bit of both. I think it's good to have a balance. I think that especially if you don't have a lot of time, as this point has been raised already, I know today by a few people, you know, like if you've got a short lesson, then it might not always be possible to you know, get with your buddy and discuss what you think this is. So sometimes you just have to, you know, rely on your stronger students. That's just the way that it is sometimes when you're time limited, or you're limited by time. But, you know, I think a range of techniques is the best way. I think that students need a balance. They need to know also that they can't be too relaxed and too comfortable, because the teacher's not going to come to me. No. You know, you need to keep them on their toes.
Yeah, tricky elicitation, but I mean, I have to say, I absolutely love elicitation. So I was born to elicit. Okay, so yeah, but I wonder what other people think.
Yeah.
Yes, so it's. I think that another point that we need to remember is we need to know our students, their language abilities, where they are, and ask what we know they can answer. Because sometimes we can ask about things that they do not have enough language, you know, to express, and that can be tricky as well. So knowing our students can help us as well.
Yeah, absolutely, Erin. And sorry, Hedy. I was looking at Erin's name, but looking at your face, I got confused then, Hedy. Yeah, but I think you're right. And actually, one of the questions that I think came up was, should you plan your, you know, your elicitation questions? And that kind of feeds into what you've just said. If you plan it, then you can use simpler language, and you can think about the best way to ask that question. And I would say, always, if you can, use yes/no questions rather than having these open-ended questions where you get a variety of answers. Try to just ask yes/no questions when you're checking something. So if we go back to that point, language item in the video, superpower, just ask, well, you know, do I have a superpower? Can I fly? Am I really strong? No. Is Superman, does he have a superpower? Yes. So does this mean you have something very special that is not normal? Yes. So I would say, just, you know, try and keep the questions short, using language that's quite simple that your students would understand.
How long do you think it typically takes? This is going to be a difficult question, Rachel. You may not.
Thanks, Gabby. Love you, Gabby.
It may also be a silly question, okay? But I often wonder, like, elicitation goes against many people's nature. Like, when you are a newly qualified teacher, you can't even get your head around what is expected, right? I mean, what am I supposed to do? But then you said in your presentation earlier, you said that you have to practice, right? You have to practice, etc., etc., etc. But how long would you say? How many months? How many years it's going to take me as a newly qualified teacher to feel comfortable when eliciting, to actually change, because it's a state of mind almost. Okay.
Yeah.
Many teachers start their lessons by eliciting, and then at some point they don't even realize that they go back to explaining things to students. They can't even see this. So how long does it take, the process of becoming a master of elicitation?
I think the answer to that question is, it really does depend on the person. Some people, just like yourself, Gabby, and, you know, some people just find it comes more naturally. And I think also it does sort of boil down to what you're used to, what style your teachers had with you. I know, I remember at school that we didn't have any, you know, time to just chat and, you know, discuss our ideas. It was very much, you know, lecturing style. So we would just listen, repeat, write down what the teacher said. And I think it's instilled in people, you know, this particular way of teaching. And I think that's very difficult for people to overcome. So I think it really does depend on what you're used to, and also your personality. And, you know, some people are just better at kind of answering, off the cuff, if you like, quite quickly, and sort of responding quite quickly, whereas other people, they just take longer to process things and to think about things. So it's also personality. But what I would say is I would say that, if you use the techniques and if you try to incorporate those techniques into your lessons every day, even if you start off small and you have just a couple of eliciting techniques you're going to use in a reading lesson or whatever, and then build up from there. I think it shouldn't take, for most people, I think it really shouldn't take years. I think it could just take a few months. If you're using those every single day.
One step at a time, really, one day at a time. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. That's a great question, though. Really, really good question. Thank you very much for that one.
Pleasure.
So should I go to the Q&A and see what other questions that we've got in there as we've gone through the reflective questions? So yeah, we've covered a few of those, haven't we, already? So the nominating one we've kind of dealt with. That was a great question, Erin. Really good. I hope you're happy with the response. If not, please, ask again. Okay, Ross. Yeah, Ross's question was great. So what do you do as a teacher if the student shows they know the word by saying it's in their L1? This is a really good question. And you know what? My answer would be, okay, what do we want? Why do we elicit? What do we want our students to be able to do? We want our students to become independent learners. So why not say to your student, listen, and especially if you don't have much time in the lesson, you could either say, okay, so what I want you to do is, for homework, I want you to find out the answer to this question. Yeah, I want you to find that word, and you're going to come in tomorrow and you're going to tell us all, and you're going to teach us. Yeah, you're going to teach us what that is. And actually, if your student has a bilingual dictionary to hand, just say, okay, why don't you just look it up in your dictionary, and then we can deal with any questions you might have, because you're actually encouraging those strategies for your student to be able to do outside of the lesson. Because if your student outside of your class comes across a word that they do not know, you're not there. You're not there for them. They have to learn how to look it up in a dictionary. So why not start in the classroom? That's what I say. Does anyone else have anything else they want to add to my answer? No? Okay, great. So let's move on. Okay, so we've definitely talked about elicitation questions and how you should plan them. Okay, so we've discussed that one already. Definitely plan initially, and when you feel comfortable, of course, you don't need to necessarily plan everything. Okay, but definitely to start with, plan exactly how you're going to elicit from your students, which technique you're going to use, which is the most effective technique. Remember, it's not just about you, it's about your students. If it's easier just to show a picture, show a picture. So think about the best way of eliciting. Someone's just put, quite interesting, how can you apply the miming in a Zoom call? Excellent question, because obviously we're all online these days. I mean, it's this, in my opinion, I think it's the same. You can mime, as I did in the video, you can mime, oh, I wake up at, and I brush my teeth. You can do all that over Zoom. It's no different from being in the classroom, really, as far as I can see. Gabby, do you have anything else you want to add to that? What do you think?
Hi, I just wanted to talk about online and the elicitation online. I think there are definitely challenges to that, of course, and I agree with what you said, Rachel. You can still mime in the same way as you would in the classroom. But one thing that is maybe a positive to all this online teaching is that because people are at home, usually we've got kind of a window into everyone's world, and it's actually quite easy to use realia. So that could be objects around the home, but it could also be the people in the place that they're living with. And I think that can actually spark quite a lot of genuine interaction and learning there. So sometimes it can be even better than in the classroom because you're not having to create it, it's already there.
Yeah, absolutely, completely. Realia is a brilliant one. as well. Like, if you're teaching, word cup, just grab a cup. We're all drinking tea and coffee at the moment, probably more than we should. So yeah, it's definitely, I completely agree with you, Erin. It's a really good point, actually. Really good point indeed. Okay, so let's go through. What was the question in particular, Gabby, that you thought was a great question?
There's this one about writing, and this is brilliant because I never thought about it this way. So I wonder what you think.
So can we teach writing using these techniques?
Yeah.
That is an interesting question, actually. So, I guess when you say teach writing, what do you mean exactly? That would be my first question. So, if you could clarify, whose question was it?
If I may, as well, I guess it's more about, because obviously once students write, they write. But what you elicit is the structure of the writing. I mean, there are so many. What else can we elicit when we teach writing? We can elicit the language students have to use, or we expect them to use. We can elicit number of paragraphs, the layout of the text they have to write. What else can we elicit? I mean, surely there are many things that we can elicit when we teach writing. Hedy, come on, think with us. What else can we? If anybody has any ideas, linking ideas, says Hedy. Yeah. So there's obviously you elicit the language, you elicit the format, the layout of the text. You can even elicit ideas because obviously students have to brainstorm ideas. So essentially, I'm saying you elicit everything, even in a writing lesson.
I'm
an elicitation freak, so I'm going to elicit everything.
No, I mean, as I said, the board is a great way of dealing with writing because, of course, you can elicit from your students the spelling of words, what they think or how they think the word is spelt. Because, of course, you're going to convey meaning, you're going to ask your CCQs to check their understanding, model and drill, and then the board work, of course. So putting that up on the board, the form, and if you've kind of made sure that they understand it, they understand when we use it, the function, they understand how we say it, then by that time, when you get to the board, you should be able to elicit quite a lot, I would say. So you can elicit, if you've got a whole sentence like he used to smoke, elicit, well, he is the subject. Great, he's the subject, where's the verb? So you're eliciting all of that information. If you're listing vocabulary, okay, how do you think we spell joke? How do you think we spell joke? And your students will, if they're used to and they're comfortable with the idea, which they will be if they're in your class and you've been doing it a lot with them, then they will hopefully give you that information at the board. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Now, there is something beautiful from Joe in the chat box.
Hi, everybody.
Sorry.
Hi, good afternoon.
Hi, Joe.
Yeah, so, I think very much as everyone's been saying, elicitation can be used to basically prepare students for the brainstorming, but also, the thinking out loud and the higher order thinking and concept development that can be used as a preparation for writing. And as you were just saying, actually by the time you get to the board or wherever you're basically preparing what you're writing, talking it out loud is a really good way. And I mean, obviously using realia, using pictures, as other people have suggested, is a really good way. I work actually in museums, so we use objects and pictures, and elicitation is pretty much our main teaching tool, as it were, because we don't want to spend lots of time writing, but because we've done a lot of that concept development and thinking out loud, then it allows the teachers to go back with their classes to then develop writing, and then they can focus more specifically on say a grammar point or whatever it might be. And so we also refer to this, I don't know if people in the group are aware, of visible thinking. So again, it's that idea of talking out loud, brainstorming your ideas, and that kind of gets to that higher order thinking. And in primary education, there's something called Talk for Writing. It's a framework used by Pi Corbett, and that is very much used as a model to help perhaps lower achieving students who find it difficult to write, who find it difficult to express their ideas. So the idea is that, again, you're using verbal strategies to then get to your writing strategies.
Yeah, no, that sounds fantastic. That sounds fantastic. So this is something that you feel comfortable with, is it, Jo? You're someone that loves eliciting.
I am, yes, yeah.
I can tell. No, that's fantastic.
I mean, we're lucky, but well, I mean, I suppose it's picking up on Erin's point that we're all in the online domain at the moment. But when we're teaching in the museum, in a museum context, obviously we've got physical objects around us, or or paintings or pictures to work with, and elicitation works so well. I mean, we won't necessarily go down to drilling particular points of grammar, but we will use it to elicit mainly to elicit vocabulary and thoughts and ideas.
Yeah,
but
brilliant
about how you can extend that back in the classroom.
Absolutely. No, it's some really great ideas. That's really good. Thank you very much for sharing
You're
those.
welcome.
Brilliant. Okay, so let's just have a quick look at the Q&A box, see if we've got anything else we haven't covered, because I did want to do a little activity with you guys, kind of a multiple choice question and answer. Let's just have a look, see if I've covered. Can you see anything else, Gabby, there? So when you first present the vocabulary to the students, do you say it, then ask if they know how it would be spelt? Okay, so how it would be is, of course, well, the best way, in my opinion, would be to convey, the meaning first, and then ask the CCQs to check they understand when we use this particular item, and then model and drill so they know that they can hear it and they know how to say it because they're repeating the word. And then at that stage, I mean, it doesn't really, in terms of the spelling, I would always just ask at the board at the end, when I'm writing up the form, because if I feel that my students have, heard it enough times through all of that modeling and drilling, then when it gets to the board and I'm writing up that word, that the students, they've got an idea of how it's spelt, even if it's not completely 100% correct. So you can still elicit the spelling. So does anyone think they know how this is spelt? So I would always make sure that meaning and pronunciation come before the form, and the spelling is a part of the form. So that always would come up be on the board at the end of that sequence. I hope I've answered that question for you, Ross.
I just say I can't stop myself again. Okay, so
okay.
To answer this question from the perspective of someone who is not a native speaker, I can say that when learning new vocabulary, like in my case, the first thing that I need to understand is the meaning. I need to get the concept. So I don't want you to tell me what word it is. I don't need the spelling. I don't need anything. I need you to make me visualize this word somehow. I need the context, and I need to process the concept in my mind first. Once I get the concept and I go, yeah, I know what it is in my own language, then I expect you to tell me what it is in English, because this way I understand. I understand the concept. So elicitation, this is perhaps why I love it so much, because it all starts with concept. So what you elicit first is the concept. Once there is the concept, then you kind of feed in the actual word, the spelling, the pronunciation, or whatnot. So but it starts with conceptual understanding of lexis and grammar.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. That's why I covered in the video how you can elicit in grammar lessons. You know, and right from the beginning of a grammar lesson, you could do a lead-in where you're asking students, you're setting up a lead-in whereby the students might start using the target language anyway. So with used to, I'll ask students to talk about something that was true in the past that isn't true anymore, and they might start using that target language. But even if they don't, they're starting to understand the idea, which is what you've just said, of when we use that target language, and that's more important than, you know, knowing how it's spelt. It's understanding when we use it, and then of course via pictures you can elicit sort of context build, you know, the story that also then makes it clear when we use it. So George's life in the past is very different from what it is now. So I totally get what you're saying. Is that's more important, understanding it, than the spelling. That's why I always say the form is last.
Always, yeah. Now there's a nice question from Gabriela. Different techniques you can use for online classes.
Yeah. I mean,
earlier, yeah.
we've kind of gone through that, I guess. You know, we could still use the techniques. We could still use mime. We can still use the antonyms and the synonyms. You know, what's the opposite of out, in, for example. We can still do all those things. And the point that was it Erin that said about,
yes,
yeah, the
the
realia. Yes. So, you know, I think you can still use the same techniques for sure. So I think we've kind of covered that one. Shall we move on? Because I know we don't have that much time left. We've only got 10 minutes. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put a question out to the group, to the whole group. And they are multiple choice questions. And I want you to think about the best elicitation technique that you think would most clearly convey the meaning of items that you're going to see now. So you have a multiple choice, so two potential answers for each item. So what I want you to do is click on the ones that you think would most clearly convey the meaning of these items. Okay, so I'm going to send it to you now. Hopefully everyone's got that. 2 people have voted so far, so we've still got quite a few to go. Okay, we're about halfway there. I can see some people are having a good old think about question 3 and question 4. Okay, so polling is closed. So let's share those results. Okay. So, okay, interesting. So the first question, stapler realia, I absolutely agree. That is exactly what I would do. Okay, we're all, yeah, if you're in the classroom, you know, there's a likelihood that a stapler will be very close by. And if you're at home, you know, I've got a stapler. I'm sure a lot of people have. So just get one and show it to your students. The second one, okay, you guys said a picture fantastic. It's definitely, as far as I can see, the clearest way of showing the sunset. You know, you don't want to have to explain, well, it's when the sun, you know, blah, 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 whatever. Okay, the next one, we've got a couple of different answers. So which elicitation technique would most clearly convey the meaning of stagger? So some people, the majority actually have said mime, and a few people have said oral definition. Okay, that I would personally choose mime. And the reason I would choose mime is because it's really the simplest way. Stagger is quite a particular way of moving. So if you demonstrate, think about, for those of you that have ever had too much alcohol, I know some of you probably don't drink, but those of you who have had quite a lot of alcohol probably are very aware of the movement of staggering. Okay, so you know we kind of know what that movement is. So I think that initially I would mime and then ask some concept check questions. So would I stagger if I was drunk? Yes. Okay. Would I stagger if I was very alert? No. for example. The fourth one, reflect. Okay, again, we've got a few different answers. Now, personally, I'm not sure what the rest of you think, Gabby in particular, but I think that with reflect, I would definitely provide an oral definition to avoid ambiguity. Because if you think about what reflecting is, it's thinking deeply about something. Okay. So a synonym might confuse students. So if you think about it now, actually, what synonym would you use if you were in the class? What synonym would you actually use for reflect? What's similar? You know, and is it that similar? Is thinking about something exactly the same as reflecting? Perhaps look it up in a dictionary and then have a look and see if there is a difference. There is a slight difference. We do reflect on things usually that have happened in the past, and we kind of think back and we reflect on those things that have happened in the past. Thinking about something is something that happened at any time. You know, you can think about something now or something that happened in the past. So there is a difference. So I would say that, in my personal opinion, providing an oral definition for this one would avoid any ambiguity with that word. Yes, Gabby.
Yeah, I agree with you, but I think my kind of immediate thinking was context. So I think I'd actually use a story, perhaps, like
Yeah.
a really short story, something to contextualize this, because obviously, as you said, it has connotations, it has different meanings. I mean, it's not just to reflect, it can be used in so many different situations that I would probably narrow it down to maybe one context, one situation presented this way. I try to elicit the concept, and then you kind of reinforce it with more examples. But yeah, I mean, yeah, but definitely not a synonym. No. As you said, that wouldn't be possible at all, I don't think.
No. But yeah.
Unless you're wrong. So if people want to share their ideas, that would be brilliant, because maybe we are maybe there is a trick, how to use a synonym.
I mean, of course, reflect, like you say, you can use in different situations. So you can
Yeah.
reflect light off of something.
Yeah.
So of course you'd have to make it very clear which use of the word,
So
first of all.
Yeah.
Okay, the next one we have sour. Oh yeah, brilliant, perfect. Of course. What's the opposite of sweet? Sour. Yeah, and even show a picture of a lemon if you really want to. But yeah, I think an antonym would be definitely the best way with this one. Okay, so I think we've kind of reached time. Actually, I don't think I have time to do anything else. So I mean, I've really enjoyed today, and I've really enjoyed meeting everybody, and thank you so much for your inputs, Gabby in particular. It's been great sharing ideas with you.